Hi, I'm Lindsay Mosa. I'm an education specialist with the American Geosciences Institute. And again, just as Christina said, welcoming you here today to talk more about geoheritage. So on our side of this project, because we're the education and outreach department at AGI, we like to make educational resources for teachers or educators in any setting, really, informal even, to use. And so we are going to share some resources with you today, but I want to let you know we're going to share quite a few resources. We have slide decks, we have lots of links to share. And so we're going to put some of them into the chat for you today, but then others will be sharing after the fact. So tomorrow you get an email making sure you get all of the resources today. So if you don't get a link today, don't worry. We will definitely be sharing it with you by tomorrow. But I also wanted to mention some of the resources you're going to hear about come from our initiative called Earth Science Week. So in case you're not familiar, that is a program that's been going on for more than 25 years now, in which we make a lot of educational resources to celebrate the earth sciences and how to bring those into your classroom. So again, we'll share some of those links with you as we go. And one of the things that we wanted you to share today was one of your favorite places. And so in the email that you got when you registered, you were asked to share a pin on our Padlet to share about one of your favorite places. So we wanted to kind of show the diverse array of locations that people celebrate and really, think well of. And so I know that not everyone was able to necessarily share on this. However, we want you to share in the chat. So what we're going to ask you to do is what's called a waterfall. So some educators might be familiar with this, but in that waterfall, what that's going to have you do is put in the chat the name of the place that you really enjoy. So any location that you would want to share about, and just a word or phrase of why it's special to you, but wait to hit send, and we'll all hit send at the same time. So I'm just going to give you a minute to put into the chat a location that just means something to you. And I'm going to do it as well.
So Lindsay, you're going to tell us when to share, right?
Yes, yeah. I was just giving people time to
Yep.
fill in. Yep. Okay, so 10 more seconds. All right, when you're ready, let's see those favorite places. So if you're just joining, please put into the chat one of your favorite places and a couple words about what it is you like about that area. So it could be the same place you put on the Padlet map or a different place. So we have one in Scotland, absolutely beautiful. We have Utah, stunning landscape. Malaysia makes you feel wonderfully far away from home. Okay. Yellowstone. Oh, you got engaged. Congratulations there. Beautiful hikes. Big Bend, landscapes, ecosystems. Oh, you already got to the geology part of it, but that's coming next. All right. Yeah, so the next thing I want you to think about is, have you ever noticed the geology there? And if so, what it's like, what is it like? So again, you could put this into the chat, but we'd actually like for a couple people maybe to turn on their mics and share a little bit about the geology. But I'll just give you 30 seconds or so to be like, have I ever thought about that? And then who's brave enough to share?
Are you looking for volunteers?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm the one who put down Big Bend National Park and right next door is Big Bend Ranch State Park. It has so many different eco sub-regions within the Trans-Pecos ecoregion that it's amazingly diverse. It has all kinds of mountain ranges ranging from volcanics to block uplifts to coral reefs. There are dinosaur fossils. The wildlife is amazing. The bears have come back in from Mexico across the Rio Grande, and everyone's talking about all the bears now. It's an amazing, amazing place.
Sounds like it. If I hadn't already been there, you would have sold me on it. All right, I
Time to
see
go
Lisa.
back.
Oh, wait, who was that?
I said time to go back.
Oh, yeah. So I see Lisa put in the chat. So you can stand on mantle rocks and touch between two geologic eras. That's very cool. So Joyce with river rocks, sand, rich soil. Okay, so I love that especially because you're bringing in other components. So we're not just the rocks, but the processes. So like the water moving through the area and the effect that it has breaking down rocks into soil, shiny mica. So you're bringing in minerals into that. Absolutely. So all of these different aspects of geology and not just the rocks themselves. Yeah, and Naomi.
I decided to add some Southern Hemisphere representation and put the Tongariro complex in New Zealand. And I mean, there's like almost no vegetation. So all of it is like just kind of the geology and weathering processes. And also thinking, probably jumping ahead, but also thinking about like the different things that kind of the like cultural significance. I'm sure there are longstanding like indigenous Maori traditions, but also one of those volcanoes was used as the like Mount Doom in the Lord of the Rings movies.
Oh, very nice. Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, so this is kind of really how we want you to start thinking about locations as we go through introducing geoheritage. So I don't want to cut anyone off there. So keep sharing in the chat, because we are recording. So we will keep these responses definitely. But I'm going to hand it back over to Christina so she can go over the schedule.
Yeah, so today you'll hear from a few USGS folks as well as folks from AGI, but we'll start this workshop off with a talk on geoheritage and its connection to mining heritage by Tom Casteval, a scientist emeritus with the US Geological Survey based out of Lakewood, Colorado. Then I'll go into our exploration of our new interactive web map application, the Geoheritage Sites of the Nation Explorer. So be patient with me. It's going to be a live demo, so we'll get into it later. And then Lindsay and the AGI crew will be talking about the geoheritage education materials that AGI has produced that you can use in your classroom with different activities. And then Sarah Hayes, a research chemist with USGS here in Reston, Virginia with me, will talk about geoheritage, mining, and critical minerals. And then we'll go through some questions and some breakout sessions throughout this. And feel free to let us know if there's anything more you'd like to see on these topics, especially with the Explorer. We're always looking to refine it, add more resources. So let us know. We really want to hear your feedback. And with that, I think we'll go into our first speaker with Tom Casteval.
Yeah, I stopped sharing so he could take over. But while he's getting his computer set up, I just wanted to mention that this does end in the next hour and 20 minutes. So at 3:30 Eastern time, but just as a reminder, we will stay on until 4 p.m. Eastern time in case anyone has any additional questions. So if you put something in the chat and we end up not seeing it, we can always come back to it at the end there.
Yeah, so Tom, whenever you're ready, go ahead and share your screen.
Thanks, Lindsay. I am trying to share the screen and I clicked on it, but it doesn't look like it's letting me share right now for some reason. And well, I'll ask Lindsay if you're seeing my sharing.
I am not. We did just practice this, everyone. I'm
We
sorry.
did, we did, we did. And I think,
Always glitchy gremlins, right?
Always.
yeah. I'm in the application windows and I've clicked on the title slide and it looks good to me, but it doesn't seem like it's sharing.
Mm. It is not. I do have a copy as well that I could share.
Yeah, and Tom, were you able to, there weren't any permissions hangups with the share button in Zoom this time?
Just a sec. I'm going to go back and redo it again. And let me see. Okay, how about this time?
There we go.
Okay, great, great. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you to Christina and Lindsay and AGI for the opportunity to talk about a subject that I really like. And did I just kill everything?
Yeah, it just went away. But we saw your opening slide previously.
I am so sorry. Okay, there we go. And yeah, so I'm going to talk to you today about geoheritage and mining. My name is Tom Casadevall. I'm a retired geologist from, I worked with the US Geological Survey most of my career. And we're going to do a little bit unusual thing here today. We're going to talk about geoheritage and mining in 3 modules. And this was kind of the format that Lindsay and Christina asked me to use, which I think is actually kind of fun. I've never done this modular approach before. But we'll talk first about what is geoheritage and how it links to some terms that I heard several of them in the chat use, and that's diversity. So geodiversity and geoconservation. And then we'll have a short break, and I think you're going to be interactive. Then the second module is on mining geoheritage in the stronger sense. And then the third will be about some Colorado examples. So geoheritage, just so we're on the same page, this is a term adopted by the Geological Society of America. And I don't know how many of you in the audience are members of professional societies. I gather many of you are educators and you might not be members of societies, but for those of us in the earth sciences community, this is one of 2 major societies in the United States. The other one's the American Geophysical Union, or the AGU. But many of us belong to both. So within the Geological Society of America, they've recently embraced geoheritage in a major way. And one of the terms that we're going to use, geoheritage, it's really a descriptive term that's applied to sites or areas with geologic features with significant cultural, educational, scientific, and/or aesthetic value. In the United States, we're a country with great geodiversity. That's an important term for you to have in mind. And geodiversity is really expressed in the range and age of rock types, mineral deposits, fossils, soils, landforms, and several of you mentioned the concept of geological processes, and processes ranging from glaciation to tectonism to volcanism, and some of you mentioned floods and wind erosion. This diversity provides the foundation for habitats and the associated ecosystems, which support our nation's rich biodiversity. And the lady that talked about Texas Big Bend country, you really hit it on the nose when you talked about the importance of geodiversity and the related ecosystems or biodiversity. This is a geological map of North America. Again, apologies to many of you who you may be seeing a geologic map for the first time. Well, this is a spectacular one produced by the USGS and the Geological Society of America. And you'll notice that the rich palette of colors, those colors represent different rock formations or different rock types. They also represent different ages of rocks. So it's kind of a unique type of way of portraying. It's not your usual road map. For those of you young enough or old enough to remember what road maps were, road maps typically had lines on them and had the boundaries of the states and identified what route you were on. The other thing you see on this map are some dark lines, and those dark lines represent geological structures. So geodiversity is really well expressed in maps. Here in North America, we have rocks ranging in age from modern day accumulating back to about 4 billion years up north, up in Canada. And so, once again, geodiversity is really well expressed in geologic maps. Where the geodiversity is expressed in really unique ways, we recognize it for its heritage values. We call this geoheritage, and we select these features, these deposits, and processes for special recognition and conservation and management. We refer to this as geoconservation. So you've got three maybe new terms for you. Geodiversity, which is the rich range of rock types and geologic features. Second is geoheritage, which are the special features in that geodiverse landscape. And then the management aspects on the geoconservation for the protection and management of those. So we manage these elements of our geodiversity for their geoheritage values. So you've heard Christina refer to this, and you'll hear through the talk. Geoheritage values applied to geologic features and landforms, typically the science, the educational values, which we're really focusing on this webinar, the cultural, one of the ladies already mentioned cultural values, the importance there in New Zealand, the economic benefits, and the aesthetic. And one that I love to add is that more and more we hear about the improvements of the benefits of just getting outside. And many of our parks and recreation areas, which have geoheritage values, these improved health and well-being benefits. These are three youngsters down at Bandelier National Monument a few years ago, climbing up and enjoying the spectacular volcanic geoheritage here. Landscape conservation is the foundation. Here in the United States, dates back about 160 years. Key milestones include Yosemite Park in 1864, designation of Yellowstone National Park, the importance of the Antiquities Act of 1911, and the National Park Service itself. Here's a view of one of the pools at Yellowstone National Park, established by Congress as the nation's and actually the world's first national park back in 1872. It's also the first U.S. World Heritage listing. Here's Devil's Tower, one of the first sites to be proclaimed under the Antiquities Act by President Roosevelt in 1906. So geoheritage in the United States is typically linked to our national park system and other federal public lands management agencies, like the Bureau of Land Management, or the Fish and Wildlife Service, or the Army Corps of Engineers, believe it or not, manages a lot of public lands for recreational values. So preservation of geologic features were the reasons for establishing many of these national parks, and conservation of our heritage happens largely through our parks, monuments, and other landscape designations. Park Service now has 433 sites. Grand Canyon is one of my favorite. You know, there's a major fire going on the North Rim right now, tragically, but still a spectacular Keystone Park for us and a World Heritage Site. A personal favorite of mine, because I worked there and was based in Hawaii for several years, was Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Again, a World Heritage Site. So now I think we're going to reflect on this first module. Hopefully you've understood and you've seen three new terms: geodiversity, geoheritage, and geoconservation. And I don't know if I turn this back to Christina, but I can ask the questions. Are there any geologic features of interest in the area that you've added at the map at the beginning of this talk, the beginning of this webinar? And secondly, is this area part of a protected land designation like a national park, monument? And again, several of our participants have already talked about the parks in Texas, parks in New Zealand. I see parks for Colorado, some of my favorite parks around the world. Jeju Island in South Korea is another one. So I'm going to turn this back to Christina and let you manage this reflection on module 1.
Yeah, so if there's anything else you'd like to add, a lot of you already put geologic features of interest in kind of your favorite places, but if there's anything you'd like to add, or if someone wanted to speak briefly about that place, we'll give you all about a minute to do that. And I was the one who put Jeju-do, which is a volcanic island off of the coast of South Korea. And it is like a Triple Crown, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a Biosphere Reserve Site, I believe, and there's a cultural heritage aspect to it as well, and
UNESCO Global
Global
Geopark.
Geopark. Yes, yeah. So kind of a heavy hitter. Oh yeah, International Dark Sky Park. I really want to go. I saw one of the best shooting stars doing field work out of Big Bend one year. So yeah, beautiful place. All right, Tom, I think, yeah, we can move on to the next module. Thanks.
Okay, great. Let me see. So just a little bit of reason, why am I interested in this? And for those of you, again, who are not geologists or earth scientists by training, I just thought it might be of interest to you. I started working in mineral exploration after I graduated from Beloit College in Wisconsin in 1969. I worked underground at a gold mine here in Colorado near Silverton called the Sunnyside Gold Mine. And I actually did my dissertation. I went to graduate school at Penn State in State College, Pennsylvania. And my dissertation was on the origin of gold mineralization at Sunnyside. From 78 to 2018, which is a long time actually, I took a detour for mineral deposit studies to work on volcanoes for the USGS. So most of my career was in volcano research. And then the last dozen or so years of my career, I was in administration for the USGS. And now, as I'm retired, I've got the luxury of being able to work on topics of interest. And I'm returning now to work on geoheritage and mining heritage. A definition of mining heritage and some background, but it comprises a very important component of our nation's heritage. It's really what attracted people here. And when I say that, I'm going back even to indigenous peoples of 10 to 12,000 years ago. They went to places where they could mine copper, for example, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, or where they could get obsidian for fabricating materials, hunting materials down in Mexico and in the Western United States. It's also a source of clays that were used for pots and things like that. So mining activity's always been an important part of our heritage. The abundant mineral wealth ranks high on the list of factors that really brought the Europeans to North America. You know, the Spanish were coming here to find gold. Later in the 19th century, it was the gold rush that drove a lot of our development. So many centuries of mining activity have left a real legacy of historic mining sites throughout the entire United States. Mining heritage found in Europe and Asia and designated as historic sites in UNESCO Global Geoparks focused on the historical, archaeological, and other values that we're highlighting. And the United States, when mining started in the 19th century, we also have historic or scientific discoveries associated with mining and challenges of geoconservation of these mined landscapes. The National Park Service really is focused on managing mining heritage sites in parks. And as you'll see, many of our parks, more than a third of the national parks, have a very strong mining heritage link. And on a lot of our national parks, we also have abandoned mineral lands. These are lands that were formerly mined and now have been abandoned. And they represent a type of heritage feature that was valued especially for the economic opportunities. So the goals of geoconservation in areas of mining heritage, first of all, it's the safety and health issues, ecosystem needs for clean water, wetlands, and terrestrial habitats, educational goals, which is an important part of today's webinar. Why are we interested in the mining heritage? There's a strong educational aspect to this. Improved economic outcomes from tourism and sustainable industries is kind of a spin-off of the mining heritage interest. And you might chuckle, but casinos and gambling are key economic drivers at a number of mining heritage areas across the United States. And then, of course, recreational amenities like pedestrian paths, bike paths, ski areas, wildlife viewing, etc. So you might think, well, what's the bad in minelands? The hazards. First of all, a lot of these features are still today open mines, open pits. And here you see in the middle the uranium mine at Zion National Park. I mean, park visitors can get pretty close to this, although there are now fences and barricades around many of these openings. The one on the right is the Skidoo Gold Mine at Death Valley. This is an open stope, which you can see people can actually wander right up to. So there's a mine hazard associated with it. But there's also protecting of critical habitats. A lot of these openings, for example, have provided habitat for bat populations, some very rare other species in some of these mine activities. So the National Park Service has a very strong program of protecting these unique habitats. Death Valley National Park in the early 1930s was established as a national monument, and the Pacific Coast Borax Company really initiated the move to protect Death Valley, and it became a monument in 33 and a park in 94. Death Valley is one of the more spectacular of our national parks. They're all spectacular, let's face it, but Death Valley in particular. And if you travel there, you'll see evidence of this mining heritage. Mining features on national park lands. This is a map from the Park Service. And each of those red dots represents a park which has some type of mining heritage or abandoned mine land features that have to be protected as part of our National Park Service system. But there's also environmental impacts in the mining legacy. And while it's contributed to the economic development of the U.S., there's also quite a legacy of harmful environmental impacts. And our key question we're faced is, how do we commemorate mining heritage in a way that recognizes its contribution to the nation's wealth and historical development, but also learn from this legacy to avoid future impacts to the landscape? So here's some reflections on Module 2. What are some examples near you where resources are extracted, processed, or recycled? And especially, have you been to any of these sites, any of the quarries, or the museums, or the processing facilities on visits or tours? So I'll let you go back to the chat and add material, or turn it to Christina.
Yeah, Tom, this is great. And there was a question from Ed while you were presenting about the connection between casinos and mining history. Is that connection or coincidence, he was wondering.
I'm going to talk about that, Ed, in my third module. So stay tuned.
Great. Yeah, Michigan's Upper Peninsula, Calumet, and vicinity as some mining heritage features related to copper, Lisa?
There's a whole national, I think it's a monument, which is like wrapped around the city, but you can go down into like old, really big old mines, and you can visit all the historic facilities and look at like what they've done to clean up and everything. It's absolutely fascinating.
So what you're referring to, Lisa, is the Keweenaw Historic Park. Its focus is indeed, as you said, focused on the history of mining, not just the 19th and 20th century mining, but mining and extraction going back 10,000 years to the copper days when indigenous peoples came to that area to mine the native copper. And you're right, it's spectacular. And our colleagues at the Michigan Tech University in Houghton are very involved in working with the Park Service on conservation and interpretation of those sites.
It's well worth a visit too, because the communities that they had wrapped around these mining operations were amazing. They had opera and culture and all this stuff, just way the heck up, so far away from anything you could imagine.
Yeah, worth a visit for sure. I know it's on my bucket list. Thanks, Lisa, for sharing. All right, Tom, go into module 3 here.
Okay, let me do this and then go to 3. If I can get it to advance. There we go. So modern mining heritage efforts. We're going to talk a little bit now about some examples from Colorado. Sarah Hayes is one of our following speakers. She's going to she's a Colorado native, and she'll relate to some of this. But conservation of historical and industrial heritage is a real economic driver and an attraction for geotourism. Tourism, including the skiing industry, is probably the largest economic engine for the state of Colorado. And much of this focuses around mining heritage and geology museums. We also have something that we call show mines. These are mines that have now been rehabilitated, and visitors can go and go underground with guides or with former miners and discuss the mining infrastructure that produce these mines. Our scenic byways here also have a real strong focus on telling the story of mining heritage. And then there's a number of recreational amenities that is part of the geoconservation effort. I've mentioned trails and parks, areas for skiing, hiking, biking activities, and casinos. This is an example outside of Breckenridge, Colorado, or near Fairplay, placer mining in the late 19th century. This mining dredge, when I first started working in Colorado 30 or 40 years ago, this dredge was, pieces of it were still in place. And if you go to Fairplay, Colorado, you'll see the evidence of the hydraulic mining. Now, many of us think this is a very attractive feature, but there's also the other side of the coin, and some people think, well, it's not so attractive, and how do we remediate this? There's many ways to recognize the mining legacy through historical designations, through National Historic Districts, National Historic Landmarks. We've already talked a little bit about national parks and monuments. And the recognition of the national natural, scenic, and cultural values of mining are expressed, again, some examples in Colorado, the Alpine Loop Scenic Byway in the Western San Juans, where I told you that I worked early in my career. The San Juan Skyway Scenic Byway. Once again, mining activities or mining features are very important. And then in many communities have what we call heritage societies or museums. And in San Juan County in Southwest Colorado, we have the Historical Society and the Mining Heritage Center. This is a view coming into Silverton from the north on mid-September day. You can see the sites of the town site of Silverton. And also, it's been an attractive feature for many artists and photographers. This is a very famous photo, Silverton 1951 by Ansel Adams. Another feature of that landscape is the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. This is a National Historic Landmark. This railroad was built in the late 19th century, primarily to haul ore out of the mining areas in the Silverton, Western San Juan area, and then also to bring supplies back in. It's a real treasure for us. From an educational point of view, I mentioned show mines. There are several show mines in the Silverton area, and there's about a dozen show mines throughout the state of Colorado. But this is the Old 100. This was an authentic gold mine. It operated for more than a century, off and on. And today it's a classic show mine. And it's really terrific. If any of you come to Southwest Colorado, I'd highly recommend this. I've been underground several days. I enjoy taking friends and children of friends there. And here on the right side, you see an old miner. This guy was actually a friend of mine, and he's giving a lecture to these miners of the future, we'll call them, or these students who are interested in the heritage of the old mine, of the Old 100 mine. I mentioned the Alpine Loop Scenic Byway. This is a spectacular four-wheel drive Jeep road. You can mountain bike here if you like. Here's a guy on a motorbike. And again, these mines or these roads were actually put in initially to facilitate mining in the Western San Juans. And they're now maintained by a combination of the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. And they have a formal scenic byway designation. We have more than 60 scenic byways in the United States, and many of them actually feature mining heritage as part of their area. So some of the challenges and opportunities, climate change and mining heritage, we see a real issue these days. The effects of wildland fires on mined landscapes, extreme weather events such as floods, droughts, and wind-blown events. The new technology in mining really focuses on what we call mega mines. These are mines of enormous proportion, very large effects on the landscape. And once again, there's environmental impacts of these and that you can explore. It's very important to carry out an inventory of mining lands, and every state in the country now has a program where they're inventorying former mining lands and the byproducts, the mining infrastructure. And what we're developing, we're working on a best practice guide for conservation of mining heritage. One of the notable environmental impacts that made it to the newspaper was here in Southwest Colorado in August of 2015. So 10 years ago, there was a blowout from a dammed mine portal, behind which there was a lot of acidified mine waters. And the Gold King mine spill actually sent water into the Cement Creek and the Animas River here in Southwest Colorado. The lower picture to the right is an aerial view of Durango, Colorado, and you can see the yellowish mine water, the acidified mine water that actually made it down into the San Juan River in New Mexico and Arizona. So we've talked about the mining and safety issues, the ecosystem needs, the educational goals as part of our geoconservation efforts to understand the role that mining heritage plays, and the improved economic benefits, the geotourism, the sustainable industries, casinos, and I think I'm going to get to Ed's point here. This is an example in the town of Cripple Creek, Colorado. Cripple Creek was a very famous, still is a famous gold mining town. There's a gold mine there, but the real gold in Cripple Creek these days comes from the casinos. And the idea was floated probably 20 years ago now to rehabilitate a number of these abandoned or underutilized former mining towns and to set up casinos or to permit casinos. So there's 4 towns here in the state of Colorado: Blackhawk, Central City, Cripple Creek, that all permit casinos, and now that's really the focus of the economic activities in the geotourism that brings people to those casinos. So we can talk more about this, but in quickly a 5-minute, our reflections on Module 3. Do you come from a region with current or historic mining activities? What are some examples of that heritage value that you can see in your own personal experience? So I'm going to turn this back to Christina, and thank you all very much for letting me give you a very quick overview of geodiversity, geoheritage, geoconservation, and how mining heritage fits into that. It's been great to be with you. I'll be here for the rest of the webinar. Thanks, Christina.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks all. Yeah, lots of good notes in the chat. I see some Wisconsin love here too, and Pennsylvania coal mining. So definitely lots of diversity across the US with some of these mining features too. Yeah, so thanks all for your thoughts. And underground salt and gypsum mine in Michigan's Lower Peninsula. Yeah, all great examples of some mining geoheritage across the US.
Right.
And I will take the screen now, I think, and move into our Geoheritage Sites of the Nation Explorer. So this is our new kind of interactive web map application that showcases geoheritage sites across the US. And as Tom mentioned, and you should get this link in the chat too, we are talking about the geodiversity across the US. So we've selected geologic features that showcase or demonstrate those geoheritage values that Tom presented during his talk. So places of scientific discovery and exploration. We talk about educational opportunities for in-place learning to have lessons taught about the geologic phenomena in those locations. We also saw some cultural references and significance related to some of these geologic features. And then, of course, the economic opportunity. You've heard about mining heritage, heard about geotourism, and oftentimes the geotourism is related to the scenic beauty, right? So that aesthetic value of these locations. So this is that web map application, we have selected 55 geoheritage sites. Now note, geoheritage sites aren't a formal designation like a national park or a UNESCO Global Geopark or forest land, but these sites are within those federally designated and managed lands. And we selected a single feature out of that with one site per US state in this initial inventory. And you'll notice territories as well. So we have 4 territories, including Puerto Rico, the US Virgin Islands. And if you pan over into the Pacific, we have Guam represented here at Retidian Point and one in the American Samoa. So I'll show you some basic kind of navigational tools here, and you'll be able to explore a little bit later. You can see, you can click and pan, but if you want to get back to that kind of centralized view, hitting this home button over here to the left, that'll take you back. So if you ever get lost or need help kind of guiding your way and exploring through this module here, this Geoheritage Guide, viewer guide will tell you a little bit about what's included in the Explorer, along with some navigational tools and commands here. I'll also point this to this info panel here. So if you open this up, this just gives a basic overview of geoheritage. And then this more info button will take you to our USGS project page. So this is where you can find kind of the latest and greatest coming out of our geoheritage project at the US Geological Survey. And then this web tools tab, that will take you back to this Explorer. And then we have some other data and multimedia, and we're adding to this geoheritage site inventory. So that's where you'll find kind of the latest data releases that will be featured on this Explorer. So popping back here, another navigational tool that you can use here in this, on this left-hand side here is this yellow button with the magnifying glass, and you can type in a location to zoom to it. So if you don't want to click around each of the sites, but you want to find something that's maybe close by, you can type in a location. I selected Reston, Virginia. That's where I am today. And you'll notice this green flag over here. This is Mather Gorge in Great Falls National Park. And this is the pop-up where you'll see a description panel. As you click the button, it'll open up that description panel with some basic designation information. So where this site is located in Great Falls Park and George Washington Memorial Parkway, who it's managed by. So I mentioned kind of those federally managed public lands. This is a National Park Service site, and some basic geology and a brief description. If you open up the values panel, this is where you can see those 5 geoheritage values with additional keywords that are used to help describe that geoheritage site within those terms. If you're familiar with the Next Generation Science Standard cross-cutting concepts, that's where we pulled a lot of the terms that we use in the educational values term. And then in the sources here, you will find the sources pop up for the entire geoheritage site list. And then if you want to go to a specific site, we're in Mather Gorge right now, we can zoom to that. And these are resources that they might be scientific reports or geologic maps or other educational or outreach materials that we use to describe these geoheritage sites within those value terms. I'll quickly point to this link right here. This might not mean anything to you. This is just the short citation, but this links out to a National Park Service Geologic Resources Inventory report. So a lot of the park units have these accompanying reports, and they're great companions for any visit to a national park if it has this report. They're mainly written for land managers to understand those geologic resources within the park, but they're written at an 8th grade reading level that goes through the scientific, the geologic information, the scene setting, the historical information, both from the science perspective and the human perspective. So it's a really great resource that potentially you could use either with lesson planning or within your classroom. or your next trip to a national park. So another navigational tool that we have here is this purple button up at the top, the flag with the arrow. So we're talking a lot about mining geoheritage. And so this flag with the arrow has all of our geoheritage sites listed in alphabetical order. And I'll pop to Cumberland Gap here. This is in Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. And if I open this up, again, you'll see the description here, some basic geology. And then in the values term under economic, you'll see mining heritage as part of that. Now this geologic maps button, mentioned it's a live demo, and this should take us out to our National Geologic Map database. Unfortunately, it has been down today, so you won't be able to see this, but I do have some tabs left open. Apparently there was a firewall issue, but I will get you to the map that I want you to see. So this is the geologic map of Cumberland Gap, and I know it's small, we're going to zoom in a little bit, but this is produced by the Kentucky Geological Survey. This is one of the geologic maps listed in that geologic maps button, because it queries our geologic map database, brings back all of the geologic maps that are related to that site. So here you have geologic setting, you have some touch on ecology related to the geologic features in the cave and karst. And then you have the geology and cultural history. And I'll zoom in here to the geologic map, the section, not the geologic map, but the written portion on this map talking about the mining heritage related to Cumberland Gap. So in a nearby formation, this Rockwood Formation, iron ore was mined in the 1800s. And this is a remnant of one of the iron furnaces. And it's built from blocks of sandstone that were quarried locally. And then that iron was processed, smelted with charcoal and local limestone. So this really is a location where you can talk about the geology through the local resources and raw materials needed to smelt and process the iron ore, as well as the building materials needed, and then the other materials needed for that processing. And then visiting this site, being able to talk about all of those geologic elements, this economic opportunity from the 1800s at a national park. So really tying in all of those features together. So that is a very, very brief overview. We'll have some breakout time to go into the Explorer, where you'll be able to pop around and see more of this and do some of your own exploration. But I wanted to be able to show you all this new feature, and we really designed this as an educational and outreach tool that we hope to expand as we add more sites and add more resources to it. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing here.
All right, I think that's my cue. All right, so in conjunction with what Christina was just sharing with the Geoheritage Sites of the Nation Explorer, we at the American Geosciences Institute have been creating some resources around that and also just relating to geoheritage in general. So I'm going to wait till someone confirms that they can see my screen.
Yep, you are good.
Yep. Okay, beautiful. So as like I mentioned before, our education and outreach department has partnered with USGS for Earth Science Week, but just in general to work on this project as well. So we have a lot of different sites, and we will share all of these links with you tomorrow. But one of them is a way to really introduce geoheritage to your students. So you may teach about specific areas already, however, you might not do it through the lens of geoheritage. And so really is just adding a little layer to what you already do to talk about locations in different ways. So someone in the question actually asked about geoparks. So this protecting geoheritage sites is a complete lesson about two particular geoheritage or geoparks and kind of ways to relate to those in ways that also relate to standards. So as Christina mentioned before, we do have the next generation science standards in here. And so if you are not familiar, so ESS is earth science, so we can focus on that. But because this is interdisciplinary, we also have LS, which is life science. And we're going to see in Sarah's presentation later, there's also going to be physical science and the engineering and technology standards as well. So really a way to bring in a lot of different topics, but then because we're relating to other values as well, like the cultural and aesthetic, you're going to really be able to bring in a lot of different topics when you talk about particular sites. So this complete lesson is part of that is the summary of the values that you read. So this is really intended to be a handout for students to introduce them to what these values are and examples of them throughout the United States, a lot of which are connected to those sites that Christina mentioned on the Explorer, which you'll look at in a little bit. But what you can do with this lesson is look at it starting on a smaller scale. So what this does is introduces students to the geoheritage values, but then has them map out your classroom and then kind of do a thinking experiment of how do the different parts of the classroom relate to the geoheritage values. So if you have artwork hanging on a wall, they can relate to the aesthetic values, but then looking into what is that artwork about? Do you see science aspects in that artwork? Do you see educational or cultural aspects in that artwork? And really making connections between those. And then you can expand it out to your school campus or your community and really get students to start understanding what geoheritage is, and then arguing why would they choose specific sites to protect. So like I said, that's a lesson we're going to share out with you. One of them that we did for the National Park Service is geoheritage and volcanoes. And so this is really looking at how do those geoheritage values relate to volcanoes. So again, this is a complete activity you can use with your students. And this is the student handout here, getting them to brainstorm and generate ideas of why do people live near volcanoes? If we think of them as a hazard, then what are some of the benefits of it? And when we start looking at those aspects of the different geoheritage values, you can really put together an argument of why do people continue to live near volcanoes for a variety of reasons. And there's even answers right in here, suggestions where the connections they might make or different ways to discuss that in the lens of looking at sites protected by the National Park Service. And two of the sites we're going to look at in just a little bit are volcanoes, so that could be very helpful. And then for Earth Science Week this year, we have a new one coming out for paleontology in the national park. So we will send you that link as soon as we have that. And then some other ways to find some geoheritage resources. We have a couple different databases that we run. One of them is our classroom activities for Earth Science Week. So this is showing past activities. And then as soon as you type in geoheritage, which you can see I have already searched, you're going to see complete lessons ranging from NASA to things that we have made to USGS resources that'll allow you to start introducing geoheritage sites to your students. We also have Education GeoSource, and when you get this link, it's already pre-cached, except you have to prove you're not a robot. And this will give you some more extensive resources from a variety of partners that will allow you to, again, explore geoheritage with your students. And I'm sorry I'm going through this so quickly, but our 2016 Earth Science Week theme was our shared geoheritage, and we actually have two sites on that in which we have an activity calendar, posters, and various media that we created around that in order to bring that into your classroom. So there's many resources that we already have that are ready to go in your class. But with what we're doing with geoheritage today, we have a range of what we call pilot sites. So out of those 55 sites that are on the Explorer that Christina showed, we chose 5 of them for a range of geologic features. And if you really think about it, it would be quite difficult to make a lesson plan that would go for each one of these sites. So it's not like we have a lesson plan to hand over to you, but I think what we have what's even better is we have a resource collection. So we kind of curated this collection of resources from USGS, National Park Service, and many other organizations like universities and news sources that are going to allow you to search for resources quite easily in order to be able to look at a particular pilot site. So we are going to share this link with you, and then we're going to do breakout rooms where you're going to be randomly assigned one of these. Now, it might not necessarily be a site that you would talk about in your classroom yet, but we might entice you to do so once you learn more about it. So our hope is that we can get a range of people to try out different resources for these different sites and really learn about why is it that people live in these different areas, how they appreciate these different areas, and connecting to all of those values. So once you get this link, which I believe Sequoia is going to put in the chat, I'm sorry, I have too many windows open right now, so it's hard to see. This is going to be the resource collection that you're going to use right along with that Geoheritage Sites of the Nation Explorer that Christina was showing. So it gives an example of Virginia, simply because our office at AGI is in Virginia, as well as the USGS office where Christina is. Just example of what geoheritage can sound like as you discuss all of the values around a certain location. And then here is the complete list of sites that are on that map, just in case you want it in text format. And then here we have a way to search through all of the resources. So all of the pilot sites are here in the drop-down menu, and so you'll be able to choose whichever one you get the breakout room for in order to sort them. But then you can also type in keywords. Say, you know, if you were looking at a volcano, you could type that in as well and search for those. And we also have the filters. So we have the geoheritage values that you read about. We have disciplinary core ideas. So again, there's earth science and life science links in there. And then we also have the cross-cutting concepts. So the major ways to connect these different sites, which ones look at the exchange of energy and matter, which ones look at stability and change, in order to kind of narrow down what skills you really want to focus on with your students. But because I really want to get to the breakout rooms, I am going to open those now. So hopefully you'll get an invitation for those. And while you look at the site that you're assigned, we're going to give you some questions to kind of guide you as you go through that using both the Explorer and the site that I just showed. Educators, and so you know there's never enough time to get anything done. But just if we could hear a little bit about each site and you know what there was interesting about it, and just to kick things off, because I was in the Cumberland Gap group. So Ellie, if you could share about what we learned about Cumberland Gap.
Yeah, so we learned that, well, I clicked on a scientific value for it and found out that it's part of the Pine Mountain thrush sheet during the Allegheny orogeny. So that's good stuff. But one of the things that I was thinking about, I'm not a traditional educator. I mostly do like outreach events because I work for a Geological Survey. But when I talk about sort of the geoheritage of my state, it's very difficult sometimes to communicate deep time. And so it talks about how like the park's rugged landscape is fashioned from rocks originally deposited in or near shallow seas approximately 300 million years ago. And then it just kind of sequentially talks about how the landscape was developed throughout time. So it's just kind of something to think about, like how you communicate deep time with these sites with a younger audience, because it's very hard for them to grasp how old 300 million years is. It's a sense of time literacy. So like kind of trying to instill that using these geoheritage sites as an example, I think could be really interesting. Like, this is what the park looked like at this point in time, and this is what it looked like at this point in time, and this is what it looks like now, and this is how we know all of this. So, yeah.
Can I ask what survey you work for? This is Lisa.
Yeah, I work for the Illinois State Geological Survey, so.
Okay, you and I should talk because I'm over the Michigan survey.
Oh, cool. Definitely.
We're neighbors, kind of.
Send you my email.
Okay.
And Eric, Eric is from Illinois Survey as well, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. I'm a colleague. Ellie and I work together. So, yep.
Great.
Eric and I met in our breakout room.
Very nice. So I don't want to have to cut Sarah off from her presentation because I definitely want to hear more about mining geoheritage. So if we don't mind, we're just going to skip right to that and we'll introduce Sarah Hayes.
Hey everybody. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So I'm going to talk a little bit about geoheritage, mining, and critical minerals and how that all fits together, and share some work that I've been doing that a number of us are doing at the US Geological Survey right now. Ooh, let's figure out how to make these things go. There we go. So society is relying on an increasingly complex suite of materials. So a few centuries ago, we only relied on a couple of elements, and then it's gotten increasingly complex as society has evolved. And now we're up to needing, like, I don't know, half of the periodic table. And as you can imagine, that's what drives our devices to be smaller, faster, and more convenient. But it also brings us some challenges because we don't always understand the toxicity and potential impacts of using some of these materials that we haven't used very much in the past. And we also don't understand very well how to turn on the tap and make more of it for when we need more. I think we can all agree that society is facing some pretty daunting challenges yet that are going to be confronted by not only our generation, but the students that are coming through the educational system right now, including increasing atmospheric CO2 concentrations, a growing global population, say that 5 times fast, and then an increasing global standard of living. And so these I see as kind of multiplicative effects, which increase our dependence on raw materials. So to sort of conceptualize this, every baby born in America last year is going to need over 3 million pounds of minerals, metals, and fuels in their lifetime. And I find that to be pretty mind-boggling, honestly. And this figure is updated pretty much every year. So you can go and find, track how it evolves in time. The global demand for raw materials is also anticipated to increase. So this graph shows the 2020 production levels. I think you guys can see my mouse, right? Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So this is 2020 production levels. And these are all different scenarios of what we might need by 2040, depending on how quickly we're able to move towards decarbonization. And so in these 2020 or 2040 scenarios, we need between double and 6-fold increase in the raw materials in order to meet our collective societal demands and aspirations. And so you can imagine that is pretty challenging to roadmap out. So we anticipate the demand is going to grow a lot in the coming decades. Enter critical minerals. Critical minerals depend on your frame of reference. It's different for the CEO of Tesla and an airline CEO. And the US Geological Survey is in charge of developing the critical minerals list from the frame of reference of the United States for the Department of Interior. So a critical mineral is at the intersection of importance. So what's important to American industries, to American society, but then also what is vulnerable to supply disruption. And supply disruption can mean that we don't have the geological endowment. It could mean that we don't have the ability to process and refine a particular element. And it could also mean that, our friends don't have it either. And it can also, supply disruption could also be caused by natural disasters. So for instance, the USGS recently did a study looking at how an earthquake in Chile might impact copper supply. And Chile is in a tectonically active region. So this isn't really a far-fetched scenario. So this is the Department of Interior critical minerals list from 2022. We anticipate the USGS will come out with another version of this, an updated version of this list, either later this year or early next year. And what I'd like to point out, so the critical minerals are shown in green. And one thing I'd like to note is that rare earth elements, you often hear about that as being synonymous with critical minerals, but actually you can see from the chart here that they're only this like bottom row outlined in red. and they're about a third of the total materials that have been identified as critical. So that's a misconception I like to confront at every opportunity. Another point that I'd like to make with it while we're looking at the periodic table here is that all renewable energy sources require critical minerals. So we have similar raw material constraints, regardless of if we're talking about wind, solar, or energy storage and transmission. And so we can't just be like, well, I guess we don't have enough tellurium to make cadmium telluride-based solar panels. We'll just make silicon-based solar panels. Well, that relies on silver, a lot of silver. And so then, you know, maybe we can go to wind, but that relies on rare earths. So I think we need to think more fundamentally and creatively about how to turn on the tap and increase supply of these critical minerals as we need them. And that can be challenging in different ways for different elements. So I want to challenge you guys to grab something that's near you that that you think might have a critical mineral in it. Go ahead and turn on your camera and hold it up so that we can all see. I should have gotten. Yeah. Okay. Everybody's got their phone. I see a watch. This is great. Yeah. Anything? Oh, look, I see a battery. I see a battery. And I see a pencil. Christina with the pencil for the win. External hard drives. Excellent. Yeah. Pencils are made out of graphite, which is, oh, look, I see an aluminum can. Yeah. Very cool. All right. This is great, guys. That's fabulous. Thank you. So I just want to kind of highlight that everyday common materials require critical minerals. So basically all battery technologies rely on critical minerals. There's zinc and manganese in AAA battery or double and AAA batteries. Lithium ion batteries have lithium, cobalt, and graphite in them, as do touch screens. So the magical component of touch screens is made out of indium and tin, which are both critical minerals. So critical minerals surround us everywhere. They're in both high-tech devices and in low-tech devices like pencils. And I also want to just point out the NGSS ties here. At grades 3 through 5, we have a lot of physical sciences as well as the earth and space science standards there that you can meet and tie in geoheritage and critical minerals into your curriculum in a really straightforward kind of way when you're thinking about these kinds of materials. So to sort of link geoheritage with mining, I've listed the geoheritage dimensions that we've talked a bit about today. We saw them in our breakout groups and in the tools. And I think that there's a lot of overlap between the geoheritage dimensions and the concept of environment, social, and governance framework that's often used in the mining industry to sort of understand where we're going with like what are the impacts of mining. And increasingly, ESG concerns are going to be an issue going forward as we're trying to develop more mines to make more raw materials to meet society's needs. Many of the deposits that we know about, so we know where the minerals are, they exist, but they exist in really complex ESG environments. And maybe most deposits now that we know about are located in complex ESG systems. So that's something that we need to think about as we move ahead. Whoop, I lost my moving ahead. There we go. And resource extraction can really cause complex tensions to emerge in mining communities. On one hand, related to, really deep, like tightly tied with geoheritage. And as we've seen today from Tom and others, mining communities really identify with their mining heritage and their mining history. And so it's often pretty difficult to get them to give up their mine waste piles, for instance, or their smelter stack, because they see those as being a part of their community identity. And that creates tension especially if those mine wastes contain toxic elements that may be harming the community health and ecosystem health of nearby ecosystems. And also, if you wanted to reprocess those, that it just makes a pretty complex sort of landscape to navigate towards recovering critical elements from potentially recovering critical minerals from mine wastes. So waste as a resource is something that I think maybe you've heard about it in the news. It's something that myself and a lot of others at USGS are thinking a lot about. Can we go to historical mine waste that contain potentially toxic elements that need remediation and use critical mineral and other valuable element recovery to try to help offset the cost of remediation? And then it's a win-win. We get more critical minerals. We're starting to turn on that tap. And then also at the same time, we're potentially, reducing the environmental liability related to the site. And so here is one example of that from Leadville, Colorado, that Tom referred to a bit earlier, where they're considering, could they reprocess mine wastes as a potential resource, and is it worth the potential risk? This community both has a their identity is deeply rooted in mining, but also I'm a Colorado native, as Tom mentioned, and when we used to drive through there as a kid, it was like moonscaped before it was reclaimed. So the mining was pretty hard on the environment in that region for a while, and required quite a lot of effort to clean up the environment. So it's complicated. Why would we look at mine wastes when we're thinking about critical minerals? Well, this is some work on the anthrogeochemical cycling of indium, which is used in those thin film in touchscreens. And this is some work done by one of my colleagues at USGS. And the orange arrows indicate human-driven processes. The green arrows indicate natural processes. And what you can see is that there are a lot of pretty fat, like large magnitude fluxes in the orange, and especially when you zoom in to the mining and smelting. It releases a lot of indium to the superficial environment, much more than natural processes. And so mining really dominates the cycling of indium in the superficial environment. And so when minerals are not recovered, they end up in these mine wastes that often are deposited in the superficial environment, which is what makes mine waste a potential opportunity for us. They're attractive because they can be enriched in critical minerals, because nobody was thinking about recovering indium 100 years ago or 50 years ago. We didn't need it. We didn't really know, we knew it existed, but we didn't really think too much about it. It's already out of the ground, which means that we know where it is. It's already crushed, which takes up a giant amount of energy. And there could be other toxic or potentially toxic elements that would really mean that the site needs to be remediated for environmental reasons. So maybe there's an opportunity there. But of course, with opportunity, there are also challenges. The economics can be really challenging without the primary product for which the mine wastes were already extracted and processed to extract. But there could be some technological advances. Maybe there's some opportunities there. And then something that I think is very interesting, and I spend a lot of time thinking about, is wastes. Those wastes may have undergone weathering reactions, which alters the hosting minerals. And so now you have a whole totally different mineral assemblage, which could require different extraction techniques. So here again are some NGSS ties. All right, and to just sort of circle back, these are kind of some reasons why this concept of waste as a resource is a bit tricky to navigate when you're working in the context of these communities with strong identities related to mining. So I'd like to start pointing you at some USGS resources. There's a whole team of folks at USGS who are actively working on developing resources, educational resources that would be valuable. So if you have ideas or thoughts, please go ahead and shout them right out. Here's a link to the education website, which I'm sure will also come out later. Here's an example of critical minerals in a smartphone. We also have critical minerals in a fire truck. And I think Danielle Olinger, who's the lead on this project, is working on other materials, similar materials as well. I'm not quite sure what you want to do here, Christina. I was going to send you guys out, but I think I might have used all of my time already. So maybe I'll just leave you to think about, like just mention this and you can come back to it. Here's some opportunities, some things that you might consider using in your classroom, things that you might find interesting. There's stuff about fireworks on there, which I think is totally cool. Anyways, there's a bunch of infographics at this site and in the larger MRP site. So we're making new materials, check back. And then the last few pieces that I wanted to just mention are that there's a lot of critical mineral related careers at USGS, a lot of places to get involved. If your students are into geoheritage, like it would be probably just about the same list of careers. And these careers don't all require a PhD. There's opportunities to get involved as an unpaid volunteer. We have a middle schooler that volunteers in the lab. We have high schoolers. So starting pretty early, you're welcome to come on in and participate in some really cool science. Here are some references. I don't want you to read them, but I just wanted them to be on the screen so that you could come back and watch the recording and get this. And then with that, I'm pretty confident that I used all my time and I don't have time for questions. But I'd be happy to take some if you want.
Yeah, we'll have time in this like leftover 30 minutes for the extended Q&A. But I know some folks are having to leave, and thank you all for being patient as we went over schedule. Really appreciate your time. But yeah, we can close the workshop momentarily and then have that additional time for Q&A.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Anything from AGI to close out before we?
So we just want to reiterate that we are going to share all of these resources via email tomorrow. So you'll have time to go through it, kind of digest all of the great information that's been shared with you today. We know it's a lot to really take in, but we are looking for feedback. I know that in my breakout group, they gave quite a bit of great feedback on the Explorer, on the resources collection, and because this is the team who works on that, we are really working to try to meet all of the needs of the educators who will use these sites. So please continue to give us feedback. We really will listen and make those changes as necessary so that things are usable for you in your classroom.
Exactly. And thanks all for joining. A couple of other announcements. Geological Society of America was mentioned during Tom's talk. GSA has been heavily involved with geoheritage, and with some additional resources coming out of this society. There are webinars that are happening on geoheritage. I believe the next one is on international geoheritage. Some people mentioned geoparks. And there are also, if folks attend GSA in San Antonio, the annual meeting in October, there will be a number of sessions related to geoheritage, including a Pardee keynote symposium. So if you're there, please join, come out. I know a bunch of the crew will be in attendance and presenting there. So looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you all in person. And thanks again for joining. Really appreciate it. Please reach out with that feedback and connect with us as you maybe start to use some of this in your classroom.
Hi there, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I know that some of us have kind of created some geoheritage related things for our classes, and I know also like the Wisconsin Geological and Natural History Survey has created some materials, and I was wondering if there's like a place we could all put things, like some kind of clearinghouse or database, or should they live in the CERC educational materials location? I'm just kind of wondering, how could we share these things more widely and more in a centralized way?
Ed, you
Yeah,
want to take that one?
Well, yeah, I was going to say several of us probably have answers, and they're probably there might be different approaches because it depends, Naomi, on how they're formatted now. We'd love to see them shared though. So let's figure out the way, like, so for example, if they're already on a website someplace, it's one of the things that we do is promote other folks' materials or help them become discoverable through various means, including a database called the Education Geosource, where that links out to it's searchable, and then it links out. If they're not already online someplace, then the question will be where could they be housed so folks can access them? But that's also doable. So I'm seeing Lauren and Lindsay nodding their heads because when I say we can do these things, it's usually them doing these things. But it's so yeah, let's keep in touch and follow up about it because I think that's a great idea. There, to help for a bunch of reasons.
Cool, thank you.
I did see a question in the chat earlier about global geoparks in the US and our lack of them. And Tom, I was wondering if you might be able to explain some of, the groups that are interested and the complications we have here.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Christine, and thanks for the question. The term geopark is used informally in many venues. People talk about a park devoted to a geographic area. Sometimes they call that a geopark. But then there's a formal designation that's associated with the UNESCO Global Geopark Program. And this program it's been in the works for more than 20 years now. It's a formal program at UNESCO. And there are about 229 global geoparks around the world in 53 countries. There is a formal process that a country goes through to identify an area, and then using bottom-up approach, communities really are the key feature here, to develop a geopark. And then there's a process by which that community and country puts forward a proposal to UNESCO in Paris. And this is a pretty formal proposal. In other words, you can go on to the UNESCO Global Geopark website and you can see what the process is for establishing or getting your country involved. So it's a really well done process. Several of us in the United States have been involved with UNESCO to evaluate, to visit, and make recommendations for geoparks. We actually have several communities here in the United States, and I'm going to name West Virginia. Several communities in coal country of West Virginia have put together a global geopark proposal. In Michigan, someone earlier talked about the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and especially in the Keweenaw area. Professors at the Michigan Tech University, working with the community in the Upper Peninsula, have put together a formal geopark proposal. And here in Colorado, we've had several communities. One is the Gold Belt Scenic Byway community. One is the Denver Front Range community. And this is all great, but there's been one, and also in North America, let me say that Canada has 7 UNESCO Global Geoparks. Mexico has 2, and they've got a third one that's probably going to be designated very shortly. But in the United States, we don't have any UNESCO Global Geoparks yet. In part, it's because we've got such a robust National Park Service system that can identify an area and designate it as a park or as a monument. And there's a program in the Park Service called the Natural Heritage Area, the NHAs. Here in Colorado, we've got 3 NHAs, National Heritage Areas, and so these really fill the niche that a UNESCO Global Geopark would have. But the final thing I'll have to say is that politically, UNESCO Global Geoparks are fraught with some geopolitical baggage, and part of it requires that the country be a member of UNESCO in order to participate in this program. And 2 weeks ago, the president announced once again that he was going to withdraw the United States from UNESCO. During his first term, he withdrew the United States from UNESCO in December of 2018. The following president, President Biden, rejoined UNESCO, so we became eligible again to participate in the program. And then 2 weeks ago, President Trump once again announced that he's going to take us out. Now, he's taking us out of UNESCO not because of the Global Geopark program. I doubt that he has any insight into what that program's about, but there's very strong geopolitical reasons that he has. So here in the United States, it's very unlikely that in the next few years anyway, a community will have the opportunity to seek a UNESCO Global Geopark designation. But they do have opportunities through the National Park Service and some other programs. The Scenic Byway program I mentioned is another program that links community-based activities around the natural heritage, as well as historic and cultural heritage. But so there are opportunities in the United States. And if any of you are interested in pursuing this more, you're free to send me an email or give me a call and we can chat about it. But that's in a nutshell what's going on now with the UNESCO Global Geopark program. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you, Tom.
I see Rebecca has her hand up.
Yes, I attended the European Geoparks annual conference in Iceland. They have 2 geoparks in Iceland.
Yes.
I was there last fall,
Yeah.
and I attended all of the sessions about education and
Yes.
educational outreach. And each one of those parks has some sort of educational outreach activity, but that there's no coordinated site that you could go to and look at, like what we saw today. And so I think this approach is really, really good. And I'm going to share it with, I know the people who started the geopark, the Reykjanes Peninsula Geopark, and I know they're educational people. I'm going to connect them to your site, and because it's something good to share. The approach, it looks really wonderful, and I'm excited to be able to dig into it and look through it more deeply. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rebecca, for highlighting the Icelandic parks. And also thank you for highlighting that virtually every geopark, as part of their dossier, part of their application, they have to have a very strong educational value stage. But your point is really well taken. I am not aware in the UNESCO system that they have coordinated those, just like the question that the young lady asked earlier, Naomi, I think it was, who asked about what do you do with all these resources that various groups have developed? So your point's really well taken, and I've made a note to myself here to try to pursue that. So thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And this approach was developed through a series of workshops and seminars where we brought together folks from AGI, state surveys, and other federal agencies to talk about how do we even approach geoheritage at a time where we weren't doing global geoparks. This was funded by our National Cooperative Geologic Mapping Program. So how do we emphasize geologic mapping? And are we recreating a database to be used by geologic mappers? It didn't really make sense. So I think one of the key aspects was making these tools and resources focused on that education and outreach piece to teach about geology in place And one of our former employees, Paco Van Sistine, who really was the designer of the Explorer, he was always like, where can I stand and touch the geology? Where in this like feature can I see the geology, put my hands on it, stand on it? So I think all of that feedback was really made kind of what this project is today. So thanks, Rebecca, for that. Yeah.
I would just ask one more thing. Could you please add as a layer the satellite imagery?
Yeah.
Please.
That's
I think
how
that
I will
would be
put that.
I think it should be simple and it would be a really great addition.
Yeah. And I know we have some base layers of the geology too. The approach will be once we get the seamless geologic layers from our mapping program that's being developed now, that will be on there. And then of course we want to have the geologic information as pop-ups as a base layer. So satellite imagery noted. Thanks. Any other questions? I know Sarah, she was at the end pulling in kind of the last leg here, and she has some really great resources that, like she mentioned, are being developed out of the USGS. So please, when you get those links and you get the slides, please take a look, give us some feedback. But if you have any questions for her now, please, raise your hand or ask. Just speak up.
I guess if I get 30 more seconds, then
we have 14 minutes.
Then I think one of the things that I want to emphasize is that we really are taking feedback and we're taking it seriously. So we got feedback from a workshop that we ran earlier in the summer on those the critical minerals infographics. And like I went back to Danielle and I was like, hey, Danielle, our participants said, would you do this and this? And she did both of those things, and both of those things you saw today. So she really is responsive and wants the feedback. We are not educators. We need help.
Oh, even as an educator, we need help. No, we definitely still want that feedback, especially from people who are in the classroom or in informal settings who are, can use this with students and let us know how that goes. Absolutely.
Totally.
Courtney? I saw Courtney's hand. Yeah.
Yeah, so Ed kind of threw me underneath the bus for this because we were having a side conversation. So he wanted me to share some of my feedback from this. So this is like my first workshop attending about geoheritage. And so he was asking me how would I use this in my classroom. And so I'm kind of a little different because I'm actually a university instructor. So I teach undergrads and graduate students within the GIS and remote sensing program at the university. And so like what I was telling Lindsay in our breakout session, that what I would love to see is within each of these geoheritage sites to have some sort of link or repository of just a few examples of geospatial data layers that can be used within the GIS project. Not to give all the resources out because, students have to learn how to Google and find things, but just something that highlights, the geoheritage's like mission, whether it's like critical minerals, geology, ecoregions, what have you. And then actually like for my class, for the introductory one, I usually have them pick a state and I give them each their little Landsat state mosaic card, whichever one state they choose, and they have to go out into all the clearinghouses and, pick some aspect of the state that interests them. But with this, I could actually, in another class, I can have them pick their own geoheritage site and make a GIS project on it, telling some sort of story and then formulating it into a story map project. And so that's just kind of like the idea that I had just from listening to you all today. And so I really appreciate y'all time.
Yeah. That's a really great idea. I think that isn't for me, but that's for Christina. So let me Christina, can I put you on the spot to say something about story maps?
To say something about what? Story maps? Yes.
I can't believe I forgot to share it.
No, it's all right. So Lindsay and crew at AGI are developing some story maps that go along with these geoheritage sites. So you'll get some more in-depth information. get links out to some of those data resources. But one thing that we didn't get to see today too was that link to the geologic map database. And from there, you could actually pull if there's GIS information available that are related to those sites. Students could potentially download from there, depending on what's in the database. But I really like your ideas about having specific data, like curated data sets that we could do as examples. This is something that we've talked about in some other workshop contexts too, about putting together activities using real data coming from USGS, but making sure we're packaging it so, you know, educators or somebody else could take it rather than having to pull everything kind of as a first go. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because like even like the story maps that y'all develop and give out to the public, you know, teachers, especially like maybe like middle school teachers or even just an education outreach event, you can make like a little bitty scavenger hunt or activity sheet with like questions and just for them to actually look through the story map and just jot down what they find out, depending upon what question and answer that they have or whatever. But yeah, that's great.
Awesome. Yeah, Lindsay, do you want to talk about the story maps now that we have a little bit of time?
Well, I mean, yeah, so we are recording, so I may as well, I can show the Mather Gorge one, absolutely. So been working to get these sites. So it's kind of like a little bit of guidance on like where to get started with some of the resources that we have. In the fact that it highlights the main, oh wait, I had to hit the share button, sorry. There we go. Can we see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. In the fact that it kind of goes through each of the geoheritage values. So this is another version of the Explorer that's through ArcGIS. And so it's going to allow you to be able to see the topography of the area while, you know, reading about what is it about this particular site that makes it a geoheritage site, and then going through each of those values. So like kind of a summary of those points, which like you mentioned, Courtney, that you could have sort of a scavenger hunt for students in which they go through each of these, find the major points, and then can use other resources to add more detail to it as well. Yeah, so we are going to release these as soon as is possible.
Yes. So you're getting a preview pre-publication. So don't take any, you know, this is subject to change, preliminary data, all the disclaimers.
I have the disclaimers.
Yeah. But you all are getting a sneak peek.
I had a question, quick. It's a little bit philosophical, I guess. So if this isn't the time and place, feel free to just cut me off and maybe I just need to email someone. But so, like I said, I work at the Illinois State Geological Survey, and I was sort of had this project thrust upon me from the DNR. So basically back in the 70s, they developed a inventory of the entire state of Illinois of like all these cool natural areas. So like biological areas, like areas of water features. And one of those categories was geologic. They called them sites of geologic significance, which I'm interpreting to be geoheritage sites, essentially. So I was wondering how, if any of you have dealt with sites that at one point existed and now don't in their current capacity, because Illinois has such a rich mining history. A lot of these sites were listed because they showed kind of like unique stratigraphy, coal seams and things like that, and they have since been filled in. So I don't really know how to, if these sites are even worth still talking about, in what capacity, how do I sort of pay respect to them? Yeah, just that.
Tom, please go ahead.
Hey, first of all, thank you so much for raising this. Yes, don't throw away those sites of international of geologic significance. That was a term of art that the British introduced back in the 60s and 70s, and then a number of states picked up and ran with it. And the one I'm most familiar with is the state of Pennsylvania. So in the 1970s, there was a project in the State Geological Survey to identify 30 sites that every citizen in the state of Pennsylvania should see. And there was a report developed for each of these. Some of them were mining sites, some of them were landscapes, some of them were other sites of geologic significance, you know, spires of sandstone and things like that. And so the state geologist is currently a lady named Gail Blackmer. And about 5 years ago, she and I were having a conversation at a meeting. She said, Tom, I've got this shelf in my office of these 30 reports. And it sounds to me like these are really geoheritage areas using the modern parlance. And I said, absolutely, Gail, you're absolutely right. Those are geosites or sites of geologic significance. And so what she did, she set up a small project within the State Geological Survey to take those reports and basically update them. I mean, remember, these are all just pieces of paper. These were paper reports that she didn't know what to do with. And so what this small project did, and I think you can go to the State of Pennsylvania Geological Survey website now, and you'll find that those reports served as the basis for the Pennsylvania Geological Survey's Geoheritage project. And a lot of these things were digitized, a lot of them were updated, they were refreshed. Modern geologic maps, if they existed for some of those areas, were added in. And I would highly recommend that you might want to reach out to Gail. She's very approachable. She's a terrific state geologist if you haven't met her or don't know her. But reach out to her and say, hey, look, what are you doing in the state of Pennsylvania and with these reports? So that's example number one. Example number two is your neighbor of the state of Indiana. Tom Thompson from the state of Indiana he told me this a few years ago. He says, I have a whole archive room of virtually every limestone quarry in the state of Indiana. As you're probably aware, Indiana is our main building stone, dimension stone state. He says, I've got a whole file of these things. I've got a room full, is what he said. And so the lady that works for him, her name is Polly Sturgeon like the fish. And you can Google her, and she has taken that, and the state of Indiana, the Indiana Geological Survey, has made a book called, I think it's called Indiana Rocks or something. It's kind of some cool title. But they did the same thing. They took these old reports and recast them. Polly did. Polly's pretty ingenious with her view of, and if you don't know Polly, again, you guys ought to get on the phone and talk to each other. And if you come to GSA, Polly's usually there. Thompson is usually there. Gail Blackmer, I'm pretty sure, will be in San Antonio. And if you're interested, we could organize a small get together of states like yours that have these old reports. And so, Ellie, don't give up. Don't throw those reports out. Go to your boss and tell them you want to get a new project going on geosites of Illinois and make something of it. Yeah.
Great. That was really useful. Thank you so much, Tom.
Sure.
Awesome.
And then Ellie, Ed just put a link in the chat also.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you all.
Just as an example, there are a number of national park units that have been delisted over time, and some of them, because in this case it was so much material had been collected that it became no longer viable to have it as a park. But still, it's, you know, it becomes a really rich set of lessons, both because of the history of what was there, but also what happened as a result of it not being protected as fully as it might otherwise have wished, you know.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, one of my sites it's really interesting because when it was originally listed, it was an esker. So like you could see like the sinuous shape on the landscape. And now it's actually all been mined out for sand. So you can see like the sand mines and they like follow the shape of the esker still, but it's not actually there anymore. So it's kind of cool. It's like twofold geoheritage almost.
Yeah. Great narrative stuff going on in that.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, thank you all. I'll be leaving now.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.